My name is Ken Winter. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how we've implemented SpringShare products at the Virginia Department of Transportation. I'll talk a little bit about accessibility, but mostly I'm going to talk about usability and our goals for a good user experience. Now, VDOT may not be the typical SpringShare customer. We're kind of a hybrid library, kind of a mix between a research library and a state government agency library. We're definitely in the special category. I'm going to blast through the initial part of my presentation here because I'm really interested in, really interested in getting into the demonstration. Help.
Try hitting the arrow.
That's what I need.
Video taken. There we go. Does that work?
It does. Okay, we're back. All right. So a few things about VDOT very quickly. You can take a quick look at our public pages on the desktop and on the mobile version. You get a sense of our color scheme. You get a sense of some of the key details of what we want our look and feel to be like. Now, VDOT's communications department controls our entire web presence. The problem that we have is that VDOT requires us to use SharePoint for all of our internal communications. I know, gasp of horror. And SharePoint, if you've ever had the joy of using it, you see this is perfect for a bureaucracy like VDOT. It's very linear, not very graphical, very text heavy. The text is very small. All of that is foisted upon us. I'll circle back to that in a second. The mission of VDOT is to plan, deliver, operate, and maintain the transportation system of Virginia. We've got a ginormous budget to do this. That is not a typo, that is real. We've got huge assets, things like, 21,000 bridges to maintain. And some of those bridges, bear in mind, might be 20 or 30 miles long. So we've got very complex engineering challenges. We've got challenges with an aging infrastructure, congestion, new pricing models, complex public-private partnerships. There's both increased regulation and there's the desire for better collaboration with other state agencies and other research groups and transparency for public citizens. So how is our library going to contribute to this? Well, VDOT staff is about 7,500 people. About 5,000 of those are knowledge workers. And you see that the trends are way, way down in terms of staffing. Other workforce trends that we're seeing across all state government: downsizing, part-time work, telework, outsourcing, which is one of the main reasons we're able to use SpringShare. A lot of staff turnover, desire for mobile, and get ready, here come the millennials. I don't think VDOT is thinking about this, but they're here now. The ethos of VDOT: security, compliance, governance. Slow IT, they can oversimplify things and say one size fits all. This is SharePoint, you will use it. They love SharePoint, they're slow, so we're using SharePoint 2010 and IE 11, which came out in 2013. Gasp of horror. Fortunately for our library, we're located at the Virginia Transportation Research Council. VTRC is located on the grounds of the University of Virginia. The key takeaway here is that they're allowed to have their own public-facing web presence. It's not real great on mobile, but they're going to be working on that. So that's an important distinction because they're really the only part of VDOT that's able to do that, to have a web presence. Staffing there is about 100 personnel in 4 work groups. These are professional researchers. Most of them have a PhD and a PE. So it's a very high level of clientele and a great place for the library to be located and natural. They've got a healthy budget. Their ethos: research is good, knowledge is good, libraries are good, because they help VDOT make good decisions based on research and knowledge. So it's a good place for us to be, and we've been there since 1953. Of course, we had zero technology until about 2002, 2004. So we were not a good candidate for SpringShare even 5 years ago, but today we're a great candidate. Mainly because we've got stakeholders in many different places. They're not just VDOT researchers. They're not just VDOT employees, who, by the way, were very virtual because they're located all across the state. These are people who might be researchers at other universities. They might be at other state agencies. They might be anywhere. Very quickly, from 2006 to 2016, we ran a staff intranet site. The communications department helped me set this up, and I maintained it. Very difficult to maintain, very hard for me to code because I don't have those kinds of skills. Not mobile at all. Key thing to know is that this site was only accessible to VDOT employees only when those employees were on the VDOT network and only when they were using VDOT issued devices. So mobile didn't work at all there. Our challenges have been creating an identity for ourselves within VDOT and beyond, working with IT, VDOT's IT group, and VITA, which is the Virginia Information Technology Agency, a new agency created by state law to serve the IT needs of all the other 100+ state agencies, which was then outsourced, bought up by Northrop Grumman. So welcome to my world. It's a very complex IT environment. So if we can implement SpringShare, I think you can implement SpringShare. Really, anyone can. So our key questions: how can we create a web presence that's going to work the way employees really work? And can we maintain it? Our initial plan was to supplement the intranet site that we had built with libguides that were styled to be similar and to fit right in. When we realized that we could move up to libguide CMS, we could go for a whole site approach and integrate libanswers and libwizard and a custom domain, which carries no extra cost. So the value of this, the bang for the buck, is amazing for us compared to what VDOT spends on SharePoint. And frankly, the results that we get. So very quickly, I'll go through this. I'm going to show this in just a second. This is the libguides public site that we created using CMS. And you'll see that we're using the color scheme and we're using the fonts and everything that come from our agency style, approved logos, sizing, all that stuff. Much more white space, much more graphical, much more interactive, and much more integrated. Really, it's fully integrated with all of the other library vendors and products that we use, including databases. So it works really well on mobile, because Bootstrap is baked right in, and that's a big deal for us because we couldn't do that on our own. The library team, the key takeaway here, it looks like a lot of faces. These are wonderful folks, hardworking folks. Barb, Gil, and James are all part-timers. So I am the only full-time employee of the library. The other big deal is that for the past 8 years, I've been a full-time teleworker. So I've worked from Nebraska, from Maryland, and next month I'm moving to Texas. And part of the reason I'm able to do that is because of SpringShare products. Our goals are pretty simple: expand access, improve communications, be more mobile friendly, build relationships and create community if we can do that, and ultimately create an amazing user experience. I'm going to skip this slide because I'm going to show that in a second. So along the way, we realized that because we have libguide CMS, we can even build a staff lounge. So this is a totally separate site. The key details here are that this is a staff-only zone. This is a place where our staff can go for productivity, for staff-only FAQ, our internal procedures, guides, fun things, anything we want to do, only we see it, and that's wonderful. And I'll demonstrate the internal FAQ in just a second. So the good thing about the staff-only site is it's a great training spot for our staff, very low barrier to entry. It's a great place to practice and play, so we've got some sandbox in there. And it's a great place for student training and internal library documentation, all those kinds of things. So real quick, let's take a demo, and I will attempt to show you this. Taking a look first at our live site. I created this after I was inspired by a series of webinars that Carrie from SpringShare did, and I had a lot of follow-up questions. I got a huge amount of support from SpringShare. One of the things that really, truly sets SpringShare apart is their ability to support their products. And I've kind of given them a seemingly never-ending stream of questions. They always respond and they always help. Sometimes I almost kind of can get the answer myself, but I don't have the time to do that because I'm the only full-time employee there. So very demanding. But what you'll see are some things here, such as in terms of accessibility and usability, Virginia wants me to put a common banner at the top. It's a real simple div. They want me to do some simple things at the bottom, a little bit hard to see here, but I have some guidance from the state, and I know how to do this with a little bit of help from SpringShare. The rest of this comes directly from the webinar. There's very little that's truly very original here. Most of it has been picked up from other SpringShare libraries who are very willing to share, both through the community and in many other ways as well. So you see things like links to our A to Z resources list. Now we intentionally avoid things like jargony language because research indicates our customers don't really know and can't identify with OPAC and database and ILL. So why would we want to use that wording? We're not overly formal. And we've, like I said, we've got a lot of white space and a big font because we've got two things happening. We've got an aging workforce and we've got a millennial workforce. So they want to do everything at any time from everywhere, from every device. And then some folks have to use these and work from a very specific kind of way. Other things I'll point out, we've got our research guides here, and I'm going to jump into one of those very quickly. As we build new guides, they're going to automatically flow into here. So this page requires zero maintenance by us. Big chunks of this site automatically maintain themselves, dynamically maintain themselves. And that's really important for us from a management perspective, because again, I just don't have the time. So I checked on the community site. I didn't see that this novel site had already been built, so I went ahead and built it there, and I shared it back with the community, so any other SpringShare user that wants to use this can use it. A couple things that you see here that, that help us out, things like the FAQs. Again, this is a widget. It's an internal widget that pulls from our FAQs. So as our staff create new FAQs relevant to novel or relevant to whatever, they will automatically appear here. That's very helpful to us. Maybe one of the very few original things we have done is we've created this simple bootstrap button that allows people to share. And I'm not sure if this will work from the computer I'm using here. Basically, if a VDOT employee is going to click this button, it's going to pull up their email browser and automatically say, here's a great site, a great guide that you might want to use courtesy of the VDOT Research Library or something like that. Of course, this entire page, this entire guide was created based on a blueprint guide, which SpringShare's advised us, and we took their webinars that showed us how to create this. It's kind of a shortcut that's going to be a framework for all of our other guides. Another thing that we've done here is we have library help. This is a common box that is extracted from a reusable content guide, which is a guide that just holds content that we might reuse elsewhere. The benefit of this, again, it's a big time saver, but it also increases accuracy. So as we build more and more pages out, if we need to tweak in the phone number and the email address, something like that, we change it one place, and that change cascades out across the entire site, the entire presence. It's a really great thing. I briefly will show our LibAnswers FAQ. This is part of LibAnswers. There are many parts, and I'll point out things like another internal widget here, our library chat, which should be off based on the time. Our library is closed right now. And you see that this is dynamic. It's going to change, the settings of it will change based on what we're doing. So when no one is logged in, it's going to say, sorry, we're away, and send you right to forms like this, where you can ask any question that you might want. So if someone enters something in this form after hours or on a weekend, it's going to flow right into our LibAnswers dashboard. I'm not really going to demonstrate the dashboard, but that's a wonderful tool that lets us all collaborate wherever we're at, hand stuff back and forth, and the benefit of that is it really truly improves our customer service. Quicker response, less dropped queries. The thing I really appreciate about LibAnswers, which I can't really demonstrate in my time here, is the fact that it really behaves in a way that is how transactions actually work for us. And I'll give you a quick example. Last Sunday, we got an inquiry from a VDOT employee last Sunday evening who was probably, obviously not working from her office. She was in the central office. I need a civil engineering dictionary. Do you have one? Right? That came after hours, and it flowed right into our dashboard. I saw it Monday morning before any of my staff came on board, went into our OPAC, grabbed a couple of citations, sent them her way, and said, these might help. But I didn't fully claim the ticket. When the first employee came in, Barb, she said, I got this one. She gave that information to me in an internal note. I said, thank you in an internal note. She found a couple more things to give the patron. I commented later in the day to Gil, who does our acquisitions, hey, these two things that I found are pretty old. Maybe we need to get newer versions. About 2 hours later, said, yeah, I went ahead and put in orders for a couple new resources that will do that. Meanwhile, in between all these transactions, most of which are internal, the patron is saying, thank you, you got me this, you gave me this. And with a final note, they're in the mail to you because we're largely a virtual library. That employee is 75 miles away from the library and 200 miles away from me, but she doesn't need to know who's where. She just needs to know when I need help, the library is there to help me out. So it's a really fantastic thing. I'm going to run out of time if I'm not careful, but I want to point out a couple of other things. There are many things that are kind of built right into LibGuides. I mentioned the bootstrap elements are built right into there, so that's a really big deal for us. The fact that it resizes dynamically based on whatever kind of device that you're using, and it auto-detects that. The fact that there are There are various web accessibility guidelines that are built in, and browser compliance that is built in. That helps us out. And that has caused us to have zero problems with our IT, believe it or not, zero problems with our communications group, which I love you guys, but they can be very territorial because they don't want VDOT to look bad, and neither do we. So in order to stand up a public-facing site, we need to know how to do a couple of things and watch out for that very carefully. Now, SpringShare products like LibGuide CMS allow us to do that, but we also need to be trained up. Thankfully, we've got very good training on how to do that. So an example of that would be, we need to know how to install alt tags on every image. So you give us a great way to do that, but we need to do that. We need to do that. And we've got some best practices that we've developed around that. So bottom line, I think, is that SpringShare products help a modest but busy library like ours resemble kind of the big guys out there, especially in a virtual way. I was really a little saddened a few years back when our plans to expand and renovate our library fell through. But I shifted gears and said, that's not an opportunity we have. I'm not going to worry about that. The thing I like about being a virtual library and being online with SpringShare is that we can look like a very together library. And there's no limits to what we can do here, as long as we can code it in and as long as we have help from SpringShare, which we've got. So again, this helps us resemble libraries that are out there that have more resources, more staff, better developers, all of those kinds of things. And it's the coolest thing. It's also very fun to use, by the way. In a moment, I'm going to answer some questions. But first, I'd like to leave you with a quick quote from Alan Kay. He said, "The best way to predict the future is to invent it. We've been inventing our future with LibGuides for the past year and a half, and I recommend that you consider doing the same. It's had a really big impact for a really small library like ours." Thank you. Yeah. Let's go ahead and ask if there are any questions out there.
So, just so you know, Brad Terrell, who's tuning in from Australia, wants to say that your Bootstrap share code is a really cool initiative.
Wow. So Brad from Australia says he likes my Bootstrap. Which part of my Bootstrap? Oh, the share. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't believe I did that. Anyway, thank you, Brad. Thank you. We've done very little that is super daring or super risky or super innovative. Most everything we've copied from other libraries, including a lot in Australia. So thank you. Other questions?
You talked about LibGuides and LibAnswers. How do you use LibWizard?
Great question. The question is, we've talked about how we use LibGuides and LibAnswers. How do we use LibWizard? We do a couple of interesting things there. We do a lot of things like forms. Some prime real estate right here at the top. The most used form, because it's in the best spot on the page, is get a library card. And it is so cool to have people out there getting in touch with us saying, hey, we want a library card. We want a library card. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've never had that until now. So that's one way. One of the interesting things that we've done that is kind of somewhat unusual is we've got this new in the library section. And this is actually a LibWizard form. And it's loading, so I'm going to be patient. So what this does is every quarter, Gil is going to take selected new items by category that our library has acquired. And remember, we're very small, so it's hard for us to find the time to do this. Creates a simple form that lists them out. You can link to our catalog. Again, the integrations are fantastic. You can link to the catalog record if you want, and they could check it out from our library catalog, which is a totally separate non-SpringShare product. Or you could say, ship this to me, or hold it for me. Come all the way down to the bottom, put in your email address, and that will flow right into our LibAnswers dashboard. Yeah. So, great question. Other questions, if there are any?
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.